Education leadership, preparing the future leaders of our schools. This morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. For the last 11 years, doctoral students from Edgewood College's Educational Leadership Program have spent a day here at WISC-TV, and for the last number of those years, we've taken advantage of having these school leaders to be in the building by asking them to talk to us about their vision for the future of our schools. Their instructor for every one of those 11 years has been Steve Cook, former superintendent of Middleton Schools. Steve joins me this morning, and we are going to rotate students through two at a time for each of our three segments. And we begin with Lowell Elementary School instructional resource teacher Becky Galvan and the director of elementary education for the Waukesha School District, Robert Antheline. And thank you all very much for joining me. Steve, let's again remind people about the nature of this program, the cohort nature of it, which is somewhat unusual, but also really an interesting part of this program.
Right. Well, it's a 3-year program. The class starts together and finishes together. And the idea with being a cohort program is so that they get to know each other and we can discuss real problems, and then they go through a sequence of classes together. And we believe in reflective practice and kind of the aha moment. And so it's a little bit different than a lot of the programs.
And year after year, a really diverse group of educational backgrounds
Right.
and geographic locations for these students.
Absolutely. For the first few years, it was statewide that would come here. And for probably the last 6 years, we've had a second group in Wausau, so that most of our students were from southern Wisconsin, although there will be a couple exceptions today. But we're real proud. We have right now 69 former or current superintendents in the state of Wisconsin are products of this program.
Yeah.
So, besides other central office personnel and other educational leaders.
Becky, Madison, Bob, Waukesha. Just in sort of the casual conversations, do you find more similarities or differences in school districts?
I would say that we find more differences, and I think that it depends on your location throughout the state and if you're working in an urban or a suburban school. I think we find some pretty vast disparities between our schools.
So what do you learn from that, Bob?
I'll take the opposite approach. I think there's a lot of similarities too.
Okay, good. And disagreements, obviously, between.
That's right.
I mean, I think it's all about the end goal. It's about providing an opportunity for kids to be successful and something that they want to do when they exit a K-12 system. And so, while we might go about that goal differently, I think we're all trying to get to that same point by using the means we have within our communities.
What is it about your career path that this program made sense for you?
I mean, part of it for me, my dad was an educator for about 45 years, so I kind of grew up in it. And when I was looking at this next step in my life, it was about the people of Edgewood for me, and the relationships that they immediately connected was one of the reasons why I decided to come to the program.
At what point, Becky, did the idea of leadership, education leadership, occur to you? I mean, did you get into teaching thinking I'm going to be an educational leader someday?
Not necessarily, but the more you go through your career, you're exposed to different leadership styles, and it's always what can I do better than we're already doing?
I mean, how would you define leadership today in schools? Even, just personally from your own perspective, what constitutes an educational leader?
Someone who can build relationships with staff members and with kids, and somebody who has a bigger vision for where you'd like people to move together.
Which just has to sound easier to say than to actually do, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a big job. You're not only working with adults, but you're working with kids coming at to you 5 years old, if not younger. So I think also just to add to that too is just being as reflective as possible in your practice. And the things we do on a daily basis.
Now let me just check this, because people watching this show, if we asked them, okay, list the big issues in education today, I'm sure they would say finances. I'm sure here in Madison they would say the education gap, just because it gets so much attention. Politics has probably entered into it more in the last few years than at any time prior to this, and that would probably come top of mind. But what would you say are the biggest issues facing our schools today?
I think one of them is there are more things we have to do, like through assessments or just different aspects from government or DPI. But there's also more things we need to do for kids, and so trying to find that balance about new skill sets for kids as we keep going into a more global economy, a global world, but yet also the fact that we have more requirements on educational practices, on teachers, on administrators, and trying to kind of balance all those pieces.
So is it fair to say, Becky, that there is a very different view within the school from outside of the school of what the really important issues are?
Absolutely. Every day we go to work and we're working with kids primarily. And so when we talk about school outside of school, you miss the entire purpose of our practice, which is really the kids.
How is that reflected in the curriculum, Steve? This idea that you're preparing leaders to be leaders in their communities, and yet so much of what you would hear from them in their day-to-day work is the administrative stuff of actually making a school run efficiently and effectively.
Well, we of course believe, and I've believed that every leader is a teacher and every teacher is a leader, no matter what position you have in a school district. So leadership is pervasive throughout a system. That said, we need people that can, as Becky mentioned, see the bigger picture and have reflective practice, as Bob said, it's changing. And so if we don't apply some reflection to our practice, we don't meet the needs of the kids. And that's what we're all there for. And we may have specialized jobs, but ultimately, the only thing that matters is the success of the students.
Yeah. All right, well, part of the fun of this day is that we get to rotate people in from around the state. Becky and Bob, thank you very much. When we come back, perspectives from lacrosse. And College Education Leadership Graduate School Professor Steve Cook and I are joined for this segment by instructional facilitator reading specialist for Monroe Schools Terry Montgomery and La Crosse Central High School Ben Henninger. I promoted Ashwaubenon a little too soon in the first segment. That's coming up a little bit later. So thank you very, very much, Terry and Ben, for joining us. Because you each have a unique perspective on this idea of educational leadership, I would like you to talk a little bit about how that fits into your path, Ben, and your career. How does the whole idea of educational leadership work with what you'd like to do and are doing?
Well, I bring a little bit different perspective than a lot of people do. First and foremost, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. Love working with kids. As a band director, a lot of things that are intrinsic to school leadership are things that we're expected to do every single day. Organizing large groups of people, carrying out some pretty elaborate things that culminate in the performance. And as school administrators, we are expected to perform. As band directors, we're expected to perform. And I think a lot of these tendencies are very intricately connected.
Yeah.
And so I'm fascinated by how school governance works, getting all those disparate pieces to come together for this absolutely wonderful symphony of motion and sound.
Yeah. It's interesting. When we started this, when Steve and I started doing this, Terry, 11 years ago, this was really sort of a superintendent-to-be training kind of a program. And it's evolved over the years to recognize leadership throughout various levels of the schools. How do you see that in Monroe schools in particular, in your own work, that leadership is not just something that you find at the top, that it's something that has to be woven throughout the entire system?
You're right about that. I think that leadership starts with our teacher leaders, and then it evolves into positions like my own as an instructional facilitator, and from there into more administrative positions. And so we want to promote all of our leaders from the bottom to the top, so that we have leaders in all aspects of education.
What does an instructional facilitator do?
An instructional facilitator, I go into the classrooms and I help teachers do a better job at teaching, to learn how to actively engage students in their learning, to use technology to help with that active engagement, and to use the best practices that are now in education.
Do you think people have any idea how intricate the process is in the schools for professional development, for teacher support, for the kind of resources that you provide in your work?
No, I don't believe that they do.
I don't either.
And I also think that a lot of districts more and more are involving more instructional facilitators in the process because of the outcome that you get with that having those coaches in your district promotes professional development a lot faster than bringing in a one-day expert in the area to talk to your teachers. When you have that ongoing support for your teachers, they're more apt to adopt those best practices than the one and done type of thing.
Ben, how does the political climate, the popular culture conversation around public education affect you and your colleagues in your work?
Well, I'm certain that the political climate is pervasive. It affects all of us deeply. Teachers, administrators, anybody who works with kids, at the core is this humane love for children. And we want to believe that wherever we are, we can do what's best for children. And just with what's happened in the last couple of years, a lot of what's dominated our conversations has tended to focus on the political climate and not the kids, who are the most important. Districts have the ability, depending on where they are, to set the agenda for what's best for kids. For example, in lacrosse, we are very guilty as administrators of using jargon a lot. People are like, so what are PLCs?
Sure.
What's RTI? What are all of these other things that will help kids?
Sure.
But how do they relate to this political climate? Well, as we've learned through the program, as I've learned in my short time at lacrosse, collaboration is key to doing what's best for kids. The professional learning community model brings together facilitators, brings together teachers, brings together administrators, brings together all the parties who help deliver the highest quality instruction for our students. And I think when we do that right, all that political background noise just goes away. And the quicker we can get that to kind of calm down, the better off we're going to be.
Has it influenced your approach to all this, Steve? The politics of all this, which, I mean, you've been dealing with a long time in many different ways, but
Right.
not like this.
No, I think with what's happening right now and that, I think it's emphasized our core belief in this program that it's all about people. It's all about relationships. And ultimately, you have to trust each other and, just have that personal relationship. What's interesting from our program is Terry's superintendent is a graduate of this program. And Ben in lacrosse has at least 3 people that I know of that are graduates who are
Discovering more every day.
right, who are graduates of this program. And I hope if there's one thing they leave with, it's that this great understanding and feeling that it's all about people and learning from each other and respecting each other.
So what role I hate to just limit it to parents, but parents and citizens in the district without kids in the schools, what roles do they play in supporting this collaboration and the kind of work that you have to do to build support for the public schools?
I think it's important for us to have the community behind us because they are the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And so having them come into the schools and see what we do, even if they don't have children in the schools any longer, is very important so that they can see what it is we are doing in the community to help promote those people when they leave the school to become their workers and the people that work for them.
Do you think that sense of welcome exists in the lacrosse schools, Ben?
Absolutely. Once again, dependent upon what corner of the state you find yourself in. I mean, lacrosse, we have the advantage of being a little bit larger system. Mm-hmm. being a larger system affords you some financial flexibility that you will not have in a much more rural district. Having worked in rural, suburban, and urban districts has really broadened my perspective on how important this conversation is.
Is there a different environment in a bigger system? Is it less intimate? And is there a trade-off there?
Once again, it's all from our perspective. As a band director with a lot of insights into how the administrative world works, I can tell firsthand that the same relationships with students are there, regardless of where you find yourself teaching. But the layers upon layers, like, is your board policy governance? I mean, it all depends on what kind of values the community has. And I think that tends to dominate the conversation more than anything else.
Ben and Terry, thank you both very much for your time. We're going to welcome 2 more opinions on this when we come back right after this. For our last segment, we welcome Ashwaubenon school teacher Mark Jimos and Madison attorney and Edgewood adjunct professor Melita Piontek. All right, Professor Cook, we got a ringer in the room here.
Right. What's unusual about this class, this particular class, is called Law and Media.
Right.
And typically a law class, you know, you take and you study briefs and what have you. We are privileged to work with 5 practicing school attorneys who give of their time to our students. And each student does a major law research project during the semester. And then during the off time between the start and the finish, when they present their hour-long law project to the class, we talk about media and we talk about public relations and things like that. But Melina is representative of those 5 attorneys who have selfishly given and are just an integral part of this program, and I think make it unique in the state in terms of a law class.
You have worked within the system. You worked for MMSD, and now you're in private practice, Melina.
Yes.
So give me your perspective on this intersection of law and education.
I believe it gives the students real-world practice for what they're going to experience as a superintendent in both my position as being in-house and as a private practitioner of school law. There are so many legal issues that a superintendent has to deal with on a daily basis, as well as dealing with the community and the public perception and the media. And so this class gives the students a real opportunity to pull everything together, to wear that hat, try it on, and really prepare for their jobs.
I was thinking, our worlds bump up against each other a little bit.
Yes, they do.
And yet we both have a real interest of the media and legal counsel for the schools in protecting the kids and protecting the public's right to know, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
a shared responsibility.
Yes, it's a balance we walk every day. Kids come first, but absolutely our taxpayers, you know, pay our salaries, and they pay for our schools, they pay to educate our kids, and they have a right to know what's going on. And so we need to just find that balance on a daily basis.
Mark, again, just sort of looking at your career path, I'm wondering, when is the time that you decided, all right, I want to learn more about the law component, I want to learn more about the media component, I want to take on this idea of educational leadership?
I think that it's probably been, I mean, I've been teaching for 21 years now, instrumental music, much like Ben is doing. And so I think that leadership component has been part of my career for a while. I started to see myself, I think, in that role as a administrator probably about 5 years ago. And then within the last couple of years, I think I really felt like I got the itch to really take it to the next step. And I was, to be honest with you, it was a very scary thing for me to do, because I had been doing the band directing thing for 21 years, I still am. So, you know, I had some nights where I laid awake a little bit and thought, what am I doing here? But I'm really, it's invigorating to be in the class format that we're in. I love the cohort model. I love the experience of our professors and the real life experiences that they share with us. It's great working on this legal project and having lawyers like Melina. I'm working with attorney David Friedman. It's just wonderful. And so it's those real life, those experiences, those are the things I think that I'm really going to remember, down the road when I'm in that role as being an administrator.
So this will inevitably lead to another job in administration for you. You won't practice these skills necessarily in the music world in which you currently operate.
Yeah, that's my career path now that I see myself going into, is being the principal, assistant principal, to eventually becoming a superintendent. I like, that's intriguing to me. So, but I definitely want some mentorship as I'm going along in that process and doing that. So I see that, probably the assistant principal or a principal being my next career path. So.
In all of these segments, Melina, we've brought out the political environment in which we're all living today. Has that changed your thinking about what you bring to this program and about what you can offer the students here?
I can't say that it's changed my approach. I think we're all more cautious about being sensitive to the polarized ends of the spectrum and meeting the middle as well, and serving the needs of our children within that context can be very difficult. And finding a message that answers the questions and meets the needs of our community it's more difficult.
Are you optimistic, Mark, about the future of public education?
I'm very optimistic of it, and it takes no more than just going to school in the morning and working with the students. But they really just bring life to you in everything that you do, even if you're a little bit down about something, or if you see something in the news, or if you see something, you see a yard sign or something like that, or anything like that might be perceived as being a little bit negative. The students are just great energy force behind that. I mean, they just really bring you, they really keep you going, and so I'm very optimistic about it in the future. So.
You get the last 30 seconds, Professor Cook, about the future of education leadership.
Well, we're in good hands. I've seen 13 years of some of the finest and best, and I think they're going out with a practical experience. You've been a great help to our program, Neil, and I thank you for being a part of it. And so I'm confident that we're putting people in place that will meet the challenge.
I get optimistic every year after we do this. Thank you both very much. We're going to come back and wrap up For the Record right after this. My thanks to Steve and his students for being here today. Next week, we continue with this education theme as we welcome new Madison College President Dr. Jack Daniels, the third to For the Record. Enjoy what's left of your holiday weekend. We'll see you next Sunday.